Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego in the midst of the fire. Here's a tale of some lads you may know, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. They lived in Israel right up to the day an army invaded and took them away. In Babylon they served as slaves in the land, not exactly the lives of which they had planned. Though they served the king, they stayed loyal to God, even if that meant doing things others thought odd. They didn't go with the flow or party with the crowd, getting tipsy on drinks, singing off-key and loud. Nor did they eat all the paganite food, but said, "No, thank you, please," so as not to be rude. Though it might well be said that life as a slave is a style of life that few tend to crave, yet God was still with them in blessing and care, to lift up their hopes and dispel their despair. Then one day the king, in his humblest way, said, "A statue of me should be put on display. We'll make it ginormous, all covered in gold, which you can all worship," is what they were told. "I'll write out a law and make a decree, that on a set day you can all worship me. We'll have trumpets and thumpets to make a great sound, and when the horns blow, you will bow to the ground." True to his word, the king set about to build him a statue tall and stout. Up it rose, 90 feet high, where its head came to be where the birds tend to fly. When at last it was finished and put into place, the king came a-running with a grin on his face. Like a child excited with an overlarge toy, he jumped all about in his pride and his joy. The date was set and the word sent abroad, when all should come worship his statue as God. If they ignored the king or refused his desire, they'd be tied up tight and tossed in the fire. People packed in when the day finally came, packed in like sardines and smelling the same. They gazed at the statue in open-mouthed awe, not believing the size or the riches they saw. Then hundreds of trumpets and instruments played. One could hardly describe the noise which they made. The best word you could use would probably be wow. When it came to a stop, someone shouted, "Now bow!" Before the statue in the hot blazing sun, the people bowed down, everyone. Everyone, that is, except for just 3, who before the statue would not take a knee. The officials ran to them, shocked and dismayed at this show of defiance so clearly displayed. They were huffing and puffing, saying, "Really, see here, this kind of behavior's forbidden, we fear." They marched them off to the throne of the king and brought up the charges they intended to bring. "These Jews," they accused, "didn't listen to you. They don't bow to your idol like the rest of us do." "Is it true?" said the king, with his face going red. "Did you all ignore the command which I said? To not bow to my statue so awesome and great? Don't you know the result of the fate you await?" The 3 men replied, "O king, yes, it's true. We couldn't obey the command sent from you. There's only one God we may worship that way. If we bow to another, then our God we'd betray. And the fiery furnace won't cause us to change. An escape from its flames our God can arrange. But if our demise he should choose to allow, we tell you, O king, we still will not bow." The king went from red to a purply shade. Sputters and hisses were the sounds which he made. He jumped up and down like a ball on a spring, shouting, "No one refuses the command of the king. Heat up the furnace 7 times more than hot. Pile on the fuel, give it all that we've got. The touch of its flames you 3 will all share. We'll see if your God can save you from there." They bound up the 3, their hands and their feet. As they came to the furnace, they could all feel the heat. When they opened the doors and threw them inside, the heat was so much their guards fell and died. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego were all unaffected by the flame's red glow. They just smiled and talked as they stood in the fire, then looked up and waved to their open-mouthed sire. The king rubbed his eyes, then shook his head. How could they be laughing when they ought to be dead? And then he saw there was still something more. They had thrown in 3 men, but now there were 4. It was clear that their God had answered their prayer. They weren't even singed, not one little hair. And what caused the king to really be awed was the 4th man looked like the Son of God. The king called the men to come out of the flame, As they came out, he called them by name. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, from this day on my favor you'll know. As for your God, he went on to say, he shall be honored from this very day. Should any insult this God who delivers, to hear of their fate would give you the shivers. These three young men were living a life that often had stress, worry, and strife. But rather than look for the easiest way, they chose to serve God and take come what may. If we choose to trust God, there's no guarantee that things will work out as we wish them to be. God's not of our making, here to grant our desire, but a God who stands with us in the midst of the fire.